Welcome to our channel. Horror creatures in movies are among the absolute favorites of fans. Whether it's an extraterrestrial predator stalking its prey on Earth, or perhaps a gigantic lizard or ape that devastates everything in its path. During such a spectacle, our hearts pound with excitement. But similar stories also emerge from the real world. It's certain that survivors and victims didn't find any enjoyment in those situations. Instead, they experienced the greatest horror of their lives. The question that always remains is, what did they actually encounter? Did an unknown cryptid attack them? Or was it a common animal they simply couldn't identify in the shock? Before we look at these monsters together, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and without further ado, let's get started. Near Mount St. Helens in the American state of Washington, there is a canyon known as Monkey Canyon. And if Fred Beck is telling the truth, nobody definitely wants visitors there. In 1924, Beck and a group of friends were searching for gold in this area. However, they gradually became more and more disturbed by the sounds reaching them. It was some kind of whistling, or perhaps booming sounds that created the impression of someone beating their chest. One day, Beck and his friend went to the river for water when suddenly a hairy, ape-like creature emerged from the forest towards them. Beck's companion panicked and immediately shot at the creature, driving it into the woods. This experience frightened the gold prospectors so much that they wanted to disappear the next morning. But someone else had different plans. Miners are awakened in the middle of the night by terrible noises. Something is hitting their cabin. There are sounds of heavy animals running around. The building has no windows, and one can only look out through the cracks between the logs that make up the walls. Through these cracks, they can see a trio of ape-like creatures planning an attack. They throw stones from a piled heap, try to break through the doors, climb and stomp on the roof, furiously searching for an entrance inside. The trapped men can only pray and occasionally blindly shoot through some of the larger gaps in the structure. The night seems never-ending, but eventually it does come to an end. The sun rises, and the aggressive creatures retreat back into the forest. The miners quickly pack up and drive away. A later investigation of the site revealed strange tracks, but no potential Bigfoot, neither alive nor shot. Additionally, in 1982, a man named Rant Mullins claimed responsibility for the event, stating that he had been faking Bigfoot tracks since the 1930s, and that he was the one throwing stones at Fred Beck and his companions in Monkey Canyon back then. But is it possible to mistake an ordinary young man for a trio of enraged giant apes? On the other hand, as they say, stranger things have happened. The 26th American president, Theodore Roosevelt, writes about a harrowing encounter with the unknown in his book, Wilderness Hunter. Apart from his political career, Roosevelt is also a successful naturalist, explorer, and, notably, a hunter. Certainly no stranger to fear, he is unsettled by the story of a mountaineer named Bauman. Though details about this man are scant, he and his companions set out to hunt beavers near the Big Hole River in Montana. After establishing camp, they spend the entire day setting traps. Upon returning after dusk, they find their camp turned upside down. Tents are torn, and backpacks with supplies are emptied. They suspect a bear until they closely examine the massive footprints. This creature was definitely not a bear. It walked on two legs the entire time. During the night, Bauman experiences a shocking awakening. Something enormous stands at the entrance of their hastily assembled shelter. In a panic, he fires, and the creature disappears into the forest. For the rest of the night, he and his colleague remain vigilant by the fire, clutching their weapons, observing the trees. In subsequent nights, they hear howls from the woods that send shivers down their spines. Unable to attribute it to any known animal, they realize it's time to leave. First, however, they must retrieve their set traps, making a classic fatal mistake. They split up. When Bauman returns to camp, he sees everything packed for departure. His friend is nowhere to be found. He calls out, but there's no answer. Then he notices his friend's body, sprawled in the leaves, with a broken neck and ligaments as if pierced by something. Large, inhuman footprints surround him. Bauman takes off running, leaving everything behind except his rifle. When he later recounts his story, he believes some kind of goblin attacked him in the woods. Modern cryptozoologists, however, think it might have been someone else. In Berkeley Square in London stands residential house number 50, reputed to be the most haunted in the entire British metropolis. The notorious building is associated with numerous tales of ghostly apparitions. However, it seems as if something even worse once lurked within its walls: nameless, unspeakable evil. In the mid-19th century, Robert Warboys, a 20-year-old student who disbelieves in ghost stories, is set to encounter it. He accepts a wager to spend the night alone on the second floor, where the most peculiar events are said to occur. The house owner insists that he brings at least a candle and a pistol. In case of any emergency, Warboys is to ring the bell. They part ways, with the homeowner retiring to the ground floor to sleep. However, his restless slumber is short-lived. At 0:45, frenzied ringing awakens him. He rushes upstairs to find the young man huddled in the corner of the room, holding a pistol. He is dead, his white face contorted in an expression of pure terror. Allegedly, no one else entered with him, so who or what could he have encountered there? In 1943, two sailors, Martin and Blunden, decide to spend the night in the then-abandoned house number 50. Both are destitute after squandering all their money in a pub. They find a room on the upper floor where it's dry and there are no rats. They light a fire and fall asleep. In the middle of the night, Blunden is awakened by a familiar horror sound: creaking hinges. The doors to their room slowly open. This startles Martin, and both hold their breath as they hear the heavy, wet, and slimy body approaching them on the floor. Martin later describes the creature as a monstrous monstrosity that then grabs Blunden by the throat. Martin rushes out onto the street and stops a patrolling policeman. The officer doesn't believe his story, but still accompanies him back to the house. There, they see the second sailor, with a broken ligament and eyes bulging from their sockets. Did Martin fabricate the story to cover up the fact that he killed his colleague? But how could he think anyone would believe him? Or is the entire legend of house number 50 on Berkeley Square greatly exaggerated, as skeptics claim? Santu Sakai is a feared creature from Malay legends. Half human, half monster with long fangs, craving fresh human flesh and blood. It is not a solitary being. Villages were said to have been attacked by hordes of these beasts. However, in July 1967, Dutch hunter Henry van Heerden discovers that stories about Santu Sakai may not be mere fanciful tales. While in the Kuala Lumpur jungle, he shoots some birds for dinner. About a kilometer from his car, he hears ugly buzzing and strange roaring. The sounds come from somewhere behind him, on the other side of the road he's walking along. He decides to pick up the pace, or rather, break into a gallop. A few seconds later, he's sprinting when he briefly stops to turn around. He claims to see two absolute monstrosities chasing directly behind him. These creatures are tall, massive, and appear to him like demons cast out of hell. Van Heerden reaches his car, but he knows he won't have time to get in, turning with his shotgun against the two creatures. But it's too late. The shot misses. The first one knocks him to the ground, and the second sinks its sharp teeth into his hand. Miraculously, the hunter gropes for a large stone, strikes one creature in the head and another in the face, freeing himself, and leaps into the car. The attacking creatures jump around him senselessly, growling, banging on the hood, doors, and windows, which bend under their blows. Trembling, Van Heerden finally starts the car and leaves the two animated nightmares behind in the jungle darkness. Later, he reports everything to the police in the city, but they mock him. Even his friends are skeptical until they go with him to the site of the entire skirmish. There, they find footprints resembling human ones and bloodstains disappearing into the jungle. Did the hunter encounter the genuine monster Santu Sakai? Myths about hellish black dogs are known to people on most continents. Tales are told about demonic specters that you can't escape even in a church. The origins are said to trace back to the ferocious Vikings, whose chief god Odin was the master of one such terrifying pack. The Vikings supposedly brought these stories to England, from where they spread further into the world. Later, Christians fear that these dogs are obedient to Satan himself, or possibly the incarnate ruler of hell personally. On the other hand, superstitious believers from earlier times practically see the devil everywhere, perhaps fueled by the darkness within the churches. And it is precisely in the house of the Lord that the most famous and simultaneously most terrifying attack of the alleged hellish dog occurs, of which we have knowledge. It happens on a Sunday, August 4th, 1577, in the English county of Suffolk. Citizens of the town of Bungay gather in St. Mary's Church during a fierce storm, praying. Rain fiercely beats against the sanctuary. Lightning flashes outside, when suddenly, a massive black dog appears inside. The beast allegedly leaps among the worshippers and literally begins to tear at their throats. Reportedly, a heat so intense emanates from it that it would scorch anyone who gets too close. Besides teeth, it is said to use strong paws to strangle some individuals. It might sound almost comical if records did not survive, stating that several people did indeed die in the church that night. However, the reasons are not specified, as if the church wanted to conceal something. The storm did happen, and lightning struck the church tower during it. The dog is then said to continue its rampage in the neighboring town of Blythburgh, where a piece of the floor allegedly burned by it can still be seen today. What happened in Suffolk at that time? Could the dead people and scorched spots be the result of a wild storm that also gave rise to this legend? Or did a real aggressive dog, possibly infected with rabies, bear responsibility for the deceased? It seems that the American state of Texas is the territory of werewolves, as evidenced by many mysterious incidents. Sometime after 1880, sculptor N.Q. Patterson from Kimball County carves a predator's face with bared fangs into the limestone rocks on his property. At first, locals believe it to be a bear, but then it dawns on them. It's a wolf. They recall the legend of an old Indian, a skinwalker, who allegedly viciously attacked members of the American cavalry in wolf form, claiming territory that once belonged to his people. Mrs. Delbert Gregg from the town of Gregston, one night in July 1958, realizes that someone is watching her, or rather something. Through the window, a hairy creature with wolf-like features stares at her, sharp fangs gleaming, eyes shining in the darkness and claws scratching at the window. Terrified, the woman shines a flashlight on it. The creature vanishes in a flash amid the dense bushes. After a while, a tall, disoriented man emerges from the same spot and quickly runs away upon seeing the woman. Could it possibly be a genuine werewolf? The most terrifying werewolf story is linked to the Texas town of Converse. An old rancher has a ritual for his son's coming of age. Armed with a rifle, the young man must venture into the woods and shoot a deer before returning home. As days pass without his return, the father becomes anxious. He gathers a search party, and that night, they comb through the forest. His worst fears come true when he hears a strange, horrifying sound from the depths of thick bushes. He follows it, and soon comes across his son. Helplessly, he observes his lifeless body being devoured by a gigantic wolf-like monster under the moonlight. The rancher fires at it, causing the creature to release the boy and flee. However, the man, understandably devastated, withdraws from the world in his cabin, refusing to eat, and dies in complete isolation. Is it merely coincidental that so many werewolf tales are associated with Texas? Or do all these stories have some real, as yet unclear basis? On July 23, 1974, an article is published in the International Herald Tribune, stating, "A 19-year-old girl claims to have seen the dreaded snowman." According to the Nepalese agency RSS, this happened in the Khumbu region. The girl was watching over a herd of yaks when a hairy creature, 1.5 meters tall, rushed towards her, stunned her, and then killed 3 yaks. Khumbu is located in the northeast of Nepal, also known as the Everest region, as it lies on the Nepalese side of the world's highest mountain. The girl's name is Lakpa Dolma, and she is from Kumjung, a village near Mount Everest. On that day, she leads the yak herd alone to the distant Machermo pasture, when she hears a sound as if someone coughed. A surprised expression turns to horror when she sees a massive ape-like creature covered in white fur. It has white skin, sunken eyes, a wrinkled forehead, and short, thick fingers with long claws. It allegedly moves alternately on 2 and 4 limbs, being slower on all 4s. Overwhelmed by fear, Lakpa is almost petrified, and the creature drags her to a nearby stream. The shocked girl loses consciousness. After a while, when she wakes up, she lies scattered by the stream, witnessing the Yeti's wild performance. The Yeti rages like a maniac. It attacks yaks, beats them with fists, grabs them by the horns, and twists their heads, trying to break their necks. He succeeds with 3, allegedly devouring their brains on the spot and taking pieces of meat with him. The murderous rampage apparently tires him enough to forget about the girl. The next day, a rescue expedition finds her. Due to fear, Lakpa couldn't leave the spot. Sherpas cover the Yeti's tracks with stones to preserve them. The police from the local town of Namche Bazaar also arrive. It is the first time in history that the Nepalese government officially deals with a Yeti-related case. Investigator Chatra Manrai documents tracks that are 31 centimeters long and 10 centimeters wide. However, no clear conclusion is reached, and the perpetrator disappears. The final report only states that the local residents have no reason to make up stories about the Yeti and consider the found tracks as clear evidence that such a creature truly exists. In February 1975, Polish mountaineer Janusz Tomaszczuk reports a Yeti sighting in the area. Will there ever be irrefutable confirmation that the legendary ape-like cryptid is real? That's all from us for today. If you're interested in videos filled with mysterious mysteries, dark stories, legends, or monsters, and you crave more, subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any new videos.